In the previous chapter, we learned that whenever there's a Python list, we can use a for loop. The for loop is a great method for automating repetitive and simple actions. The loop variable keeps hopping onto the next element, changes value to that, and the indented code block executes. Those action repeats. There is a sensation that the for loop is running. As programmer, we call this running a for loop over a list, or simply looping over a list. But a more professional way to call this is iterating over a list, as the vocab iterate means to do again, do again, do again. Yet, Python list is not the only thing that can be iterated over. In fact, it belongs to a larger abstract class of objects called iterable. I know, this entire playlist is aimed for beginners, so we're not going to the details about what exactly this word means. So for now, if I tell you something is an iterable, that means it can be a target of for loop, and the range object is an iterable. By calling the range function with a start and end index, we get a range object. But what exactly is this range object? You can basically think about it as a sequence of numbers that can be looped over. When the for loop starts, the loop variable I iteratively binds to all integer from 0 to 9. As you see, when we loop over the range object, it low-key just feels like we're looping over a Python list, which contains the sequential integers. Notice range 0, 10 does not give you the number 10, it only gives you all the number from 0 to 9. This is because Python's end index is always non-inclusive. If we want the number 10 in there, we have to change this to range 0, 11. So, what exactly can we do about this range object? A sequence of numbers doesn't seem any useful at all. We can use the range to indirectly loop over another Python list. For the range object, the start index is 0, and the end index equals to the length of the list. As the for loop begins, the loop variable I is integer, but it conveniently also represents the index of my list. Then we can access the corresponding element using this index and store it into the variable var and print it. Since we're iterating over all the indices, we ensure that every element is visited. What you see now is another perfect valid way of looping over a list. So let's take a moment to compare and contrast between the two strategies of looping. In the direct method on left, the loop variable var directly binds to the element and we can use it immediately. On the right, the indirect method, we're looping over a sequence of numbers. The loop variable I only binds to an integer, and then we use the integer as the index to access the corresponding element. So this one here is a two-step process. Potatoes like, the indirect method is so inefficient. Why would anyone ever want to loop over a bunch of indices? Just do it directly. Thank you, Potato. That's indeed a very good question. It turns out looping over indices has the advantage in certain cases. Consider this scenario. We have a list of numbers which stores the hourly salary of 6 different employees. And we want to increase everyone's money by $5. Potato's like, easy, gotcha. He writes a Python code for salary in salary list. Salary equal salary plus 5. As the loop begins, you already see the problem. The only thing that this code is doing is just increment the loop variable salary by 5. But the actual element in salary list is never changed. Therefore, this code is incorrect. So, to fix that, we must use the indirect method, loop through the indices of the list. As the for loop begins, the loop variable I iteratively binds to all the index of salary list, and we increase the element sitting at index I by 5. Here, we clearly see the data inside the Python list has been changed. So the lesson is, if we want to modify the actual element inside a list, we need to modify them through index. Therefore, we must loop over the range object. Hey, isn't it a bit verbose to write code like this? Yep, I should use the more compact syntax of updating variable, writing plus equal 5 instead. Another application of a range object is that sometimes we want our program to make decision based on the index of the element rather than the value of the element. Still using the salary list as an example, but this time we want to increase the salary of a few workers by $10 because they're just so amazing. Namely, there is another list which stores the indices of those candidates who we deem as amazing. For everyone else, we still increase their money by 5. Our programming logic here is very straightforward. We iterate over all the indices. With the help of if-else, we differentially increase the salary by checking whether if the candidate is amazing. Loop variable I binds to 0, and the index 0 is not inside amazing list. So our program jumps to the else part, increase the salary by 5. I then binds to 1, the index 1 inside amazing list, true. So we increase the element by 10. The same logic repeats all the way till the end. In general, as a Python programmer, it is important to be absolutely fluent with both technique. So, depending on different coding tasks, we can always pick the most optimal strategy to loop over list. Yet, sometimes our main focus does not have to be a list, but rather a sequence of numbers themselves. In particular, when we're doing computation that relates to math. Have you ever seen a funny looking thing like this? An exclamation mark next to a number. It's called the factorial of that number. The factorial appears often in probability, number theory, calculus, and many other fields of mathematics, playing an important role in mysteriously elegant equations. Yet, its definition is very simple. The factorial of a number n is defined as the product of all the numbers from n to 1. For example, 5 factorial is 5 times 4 times 3 times 2 times 1. If someone throws me a pen and paper and asks me to calculate this expression, this is what I would do. Firstly, I know that multiplication is commutative, so I can rearrange the expression by reversing the numbers. Then I'll iteratively multiply the two front numbers together. 1 multiplied by 2 is 2, 2 multiplied by 3 is 6, 6 multiplied by 4 is 24, 24 multiplied by 5 is 120. So 5 factorial is 120. But the process certainly gave me some inspiration. Those sequential numbers just look like a range object. The action of repeated multiplication also rings a bell with the spirit of loop. So let's write a program that can compute the factorial of any positive integer. We initialize the variable p as 1 outside the loop. When the loop is running, we iteratively multiply the variable I into p. The variable p basically serves as a collector, storing the product of all the natural number it had seen as the loop marches forward. You might wonder, why are we setting the outer variable p to be 1 instead of 0? Isn't that what we always do before? The reason is because 0 multiplied by anything is 0. Suppose I accidentally initialize p equals 0. This is what's going to happen. P equals to I times p, so p equals to 0 times 1, so p is 0. P equals to 2 times 0, so p is still 0. P equals to 3 times 0, so p is still 0. As you see, the value of p is trapped at 0 never accumulating anything. This is a problem. Normally, when the purpose of the for loop is to add bunch of numbers together, the outer variable is initialized to 0. When the purpose of the loop is to multiply a bunch of numbers together, the outer variable is initialized to 1. N is a variable, and I can initialize it to a different value, such as 52. Run this again. The factorial of 52. This number is pretty big. You know, the lesson so far today has been pretty intense. So why don't we take a break together by taking a detour on this 52 factorial? This number is in fact so big that people are making videos online explaining how big the number is. While I was watching them, I got a sense that human beings are actually pretty bad at comprehending big numbers. 52 factorial is a big number. The net worth of Elon Musk is also a big number. Currently in 2022, Elon's net worth is estimated to be around $200 billion. I believe a few years later, that number would increase to $800 billion. But you know, what's a number so much and so much bigger than that? The number of atoms on Earth, which is estimated to be 1.33 times 10 to the power of 50. Alright, the next part might appear weird to you, but imagine if every tiny little single atom on Earth, each and every one of them, transforms into their own pile of $800 billion cash. The aggregation of total value here is really immense. And that equals to Elon money times num atoms. And this is truly a big number. So which number is bigger, 52 factorial or 800 billion times the number of atoms on Earth? Personally, I think the latter number must be bigger. Oops, I'm wrong. 52 factorial is bigger. Well, then what fraction does this big number occupy in 52 factorial? 1.31 times 10 to the power of minus 6. That's a small portion. To visualize, the yellow cube represents 800 billion times number of atoms on Earth. The larger green cube represents 52 factorial. Wow, this 52 factorial is so big. In what occasion does this even appear in a human's life? It's all the different unique ways you can rearrange a poker deck. Alright, break is over. Let's come back to for loop. Mushroom is taking a math class, and she got this answer for a question. This entity may look unfamiliar to some people. It's called the sigma notation. It appears pretty often in math actually. Mushroom wants to find out the numerical value of this expression. Since Potato knows Python, she goes to Potato for help. However, Potato is scared anytime when a Greek symbol appears in math. He doesn't know whatever this thing is. So Mushroom explains. The sigma notation is actually only doing something very simple. Consider all the natural numbers starting at 1, ending at 10. We pattern match this expression to them, one by one. And then we add them together. Sigma notation is just a compact way of describing summation. Potato understands now. But wait a second. A sequence of consecutive numbers, adding a bunch of numbers together, both of which are just screaming out, use for loop. I mean, one day in the future, whenever you see a sigma notation in math, you're just going to involuntarily ask yourself, it's just a for loop, right? Potato picks up Python and passionately programs. And I will stop talking to let the animation speak for itself.